Hello everyone, Eldon Yoder here. It's time for another episode of Conversations with Yoders Farm. Time for episode number 7, actually. And today I'm joined, as always, by my brother Lowell. And we are actually in a vehicle driving home from town. We tried to record on the way to town, but that didn't go so well. So we're going to give it another whirl, headed home from town. As I mentioned, Lowell's here today, and I'm going to let him introduce our topic for this short conversation.
Yeah, so we're here at the kind of the heart of the summer. We are in early, almost mid-July, and so on our mind is our corn maze, especially. Of course, we have some other projects going on, but corn maze is growing, and we are working on finalizing our design, and so that's on our mind, and we thought we'd maybe give you some behind-the-scenes details a bit about what goes into a design on a corn maze.
Oh, I just found out we're finalizing the design, which is news to me. Now, that's awfully gracious for where we are at this point. We've talked about a number of concepts and ideas, but we're still probably a couple weeks from cutting it, and so we still have a couple weeks to finalize the design, fortunately, because we haven't technically started. Anyway, so every fall we get people asking us what our corn maze is made out of, because it obviously isn't 100% corn, and that is very true. We actually plant both corn and sorghum in our corn maze, and the reason that we do that is to have a kind of thicker stand of stuff between the trails, basically.
That's right. We increase our stem count per square foot by adding the sorghum. And the other thing, sorghum, it's more drought tolerant.
Yes.
Usually the limiting factor in our part of the world, it's moisture, at least in the summertime.
Yeah.
So we kind of try to hedge our bets by adding something that's a little more drought tolerant.
Yeah.
And the other thing, sorghum will stay green longer. Corn has a kind of a natural life cycle, and then it will start browning down as the grain of corn, the ears ripen, whereas sorghum stays green until frost usually.
Yeah.
So it provides a nice dense maze as late as possible.
Yep. And that usually covers almost our entire corn maze season. Gets us almost to November, which is usually when we close things down. So
yeah, we can often get a light frost before we close down, or sometimes even a little heavier frost. But
yeah,
it
often by the end of the season, everything is starting to brown down.
That's right. But even so, having those denser stem count per square foot really helps keep the maze thick until the very end.
Yep. So I guess we can talk a little bit about design and how that actually happens. People wonder how we end up with trails where we have trails, and how we do it without running over parts of the trails where we don't mean to. And the simple truth is that we use a GPS, and it really, I don't know how we do it without a GPS. I mean, some people do it with ropes.
I think it's a lot of measuring and ropes from what I hear, and you probably have to do it on a smaller maze. Our maze is pretty large, 10 plus acres, and it would take a while to do it that way.
Sure would.
The other way.
Yeah, so we basically use an agricultural GPS, which basically just means that it's pretty accurate. I think the one we have is accurate to like 3 feet. And then we go around the exact perimeter of the corn maze and get an outline to work with, bring that back to the computer, and then print it out on some paper. Once we have the outline, we can move to discussing how we want to lay out the general flow of traffic through the corn maze. And from there, we move to the graph paper stage, which basically is getting the entire corn maze layout onto a large piece of graph paper and figuring out how many squares basically apart you want to keep your trails.
So one question,
Sure.
I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
since you do the graphing and a lot of the design work, are there any programs that you know of where you would not have to do the graphing out on the graph paper? Like you graph it out. You put it on the graph paper, and then you put that back into the software and get our coordinates.
Yeah,
is there a simpler way to do it?
I'm sure there are simpler ways to do it. I have not figured them out. Basically, the way we do things around here is we figure out how to do them once, and then we basically keep doing that over and over again. So here we are, 5-6 years after we started, and we're still doing the
First
same
corn
way.
maze was in 2013, so...
Wow, that's a lot of years. Yeah. Yeah, so once we have the layout on the graph paper, we can go through and make our trails. I usually try to give it a couple days to be able to look over your trails, make sure you didn't make a silly mistake where people can walk in your entrance and then walk out your exit 3 minutes later or something like that. So keeping an eye on the flow of traffic and how people will move through the maze is pretty important.
The other thing on design that we do, a lot of mazes you see have some impressive looking picture or something, and we have in the past incorporated some picture type designing into the maze. The problem we see with that is you end up with big gaps in your maze to try to make the picture look good from the air. So what we generally opt to do is actually a true maze type design.
Yeah.
And instead of just that in itself looks pretty impressive from the air when you're looking at 10 acres of twisting, winding trails. We kind of
focus on the complexity of the maze itself instead of what it looks like from the air necessarily. Nothing wrong with the other. It's just kind of how we've approached it since the beginning.
Well, we've had people that do both.
Yeah,
and they have reported that it really does make it more difficult when you do it how we do it. So
it makes
naturally,
sense. There's just more twists and turns and ways to get yourself lost.
More
to be completely honest, in the beginning, I wouldn't have known how to do that. So that's part of why we started out the way we did, and I guess that's why we're still doing the same thing however many years later.
Because you never figured out how to do anything differently.
No, I mean, I could do it now, but
anyway. It does look quite impressive from the air, though.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how mazes in general look.
That's true. You wonder how in the world you ever get through them.
Yeah. So anyway, once we get the design all figured out on the graph paper, and we have everything where we want it, it goes back into the computer, and then you have to calibrate the image to basically get it to line up with your GPS coordinates for the corners of the maze. Once that's done, we load it into another program that runs on a computer that is sitting on top of our mower, I guess is what it's called. I was trying to think. Corn maze chariot, whatever. We have a little platform that we've rigged on the front of our mower, and the GPS rides right on it. The computer sits there, and you basically are told right where you are on your map, and you follow the lines that you drew on the graph paper to cut the maze out. So that's basically how it all works.
And it all works flawlessly unless the software gives you problems like happened over the weekend, and it take several hours talking to customer support, and if your antenna can't connect with satellites and all those fun little things that happen sometimes with technology.
Yeah, technology is always kind of fun to work with because you never know what it's going to do.
Yeah, what you were doing over the weekend, you were actually cutting someone else's maze out. They hired you to do that. So I just thought we would, while we were on the road, we're actually back here at the farm, I thought we would, while we're talking about the maze, come down here and drive around it. And
if we go around 7 times, you think the walls will collapse?
Might help it grow better. I feel
actually looking pretty
good about it. We've had some timely rains the last week.
Yeah.
The corn, usually the corn grows quicker at first than the sorghum does, but I see the sorghum has now emerged good, and it's coming up. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. And I don't know if we discussed this, but we like to plant a cover crop ahead of the maize, and so we have a really nice
basically a straw that we plant
into.
Yeah,
and so it's almost like it's been moshed out here. You can see a good layer of moss on top of the soil, which that helps hold moisture in. And another thing we do, because we're always concerned about moisture in the middle of the summer with the crops that we grow. Yeah, because we're just not set up to irrigate this corn maze.
Yeah, it also helps with we get a hard rain, and if you disc the land, well, oftentimes you'll get some of your field washed down, and you'll get gullies throughout the field.
Much better for the soil. You can look up benefits of cover crops and read about them all day long.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's basically how we get to the point where we have a corn maze cut into the corn. I don't know if we want to talk. Maybe we'll talk more about the heading into fall season parts as we get closer to fall, but I think that's probably about all we need to talk about at this point with the corn maze.
Especially since I'm about to drop you off here, and
that's also
our
good time
ride
to
is done.
Finish up here. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. I hope there was a little bit of information there that was helpful to you.
Had you mentioned about our background noise?
I don't know if I did in this round.
My daughter's riding along, 2-year-old daughter in the back, and we didn't put a muzzle on her or anything, so she's been enjoying herself and
she's
chattering,
been having a conversation with herself back there. So
right. At least she's happy. That's a good thing.
Yeah. So if you found this episode interesting or have any questions, feel free to head over to Yoders Farm and shoot us a contact message if you have something you're curious about. I'll try to get back with you as soon as I can. But other than that, Yoders Farm /podcast, you can find all the ways to subscribe there. You can also listen to past episodes. And if you're listening in iTunes, feel free to give the show a rating. That supposedly helps it show up for other people. And yeah, that's it for this time.
Brisa, do you want to say hi? Say
hi.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you in about 2 weeks, everybody. Take care.